William Bill Stewart served in the military in post-World War II Japan and in the Korean War. Before life in the military, Bill was in high school and played football. His parents told him they didn't have money to pay for his college, so he decided to join the military. Bill also had a brother, who he later told to join the Army Reserves so he could avoid being drafted, but then they got sent to Casablanca during the Korean War. When Bill joined the military after high school, he chose to become a mechanic working on cars, jeeps, and trucks. Some vehicles that he worked on were military jeeps and Ram 4x4s. When, when Bill was in Japan, he was able to avoid combat because it was 1946 after the war ended. His experience with the Japanese was very positive, and he was able to make friends with many local people. Bill also visited Shanghai, China, and ended up being stuck there when the communists were taking over for 30 days when he was only supposed to be there for about a week. Later on, Bill decided to go into radar to improve his position. Once he worked in radar, he was stationed in Casablanca, which was a relatively easy time for Bill before he wrapped up his military career.
What was life like before you enlisted?
I was in high school. I lived on a very small horse ranch. My dad trained horses. I was in Verduga Hills High School in the San Fernando Valley. I had a half year to go. I was supposed to graduate in February, and I wanted to become an aeronautical engineer. And my parents said they couldn't afford to send me to college. So I learned that if I joined the Army before December 31, I could get a free college education. So that's why I joined. So I joined in September, and lived in the Sunland town, which is up in the San Fernando Valley upper end. That's where I lived, and went to Verduga Hills High School, and worked odd jobs. Helped my dad shoe horses for my spending money. Earned all my spending money since I was 14. They bought food and clothes and housing, and the rest I had to earn.
And the second question, what inspired you to become a mechanic? What was your main inspiration for that?
Well, I went to basic training, and at the end of basic training, which was in San Antonio, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base, they said, we have two opportunities for you for education. You can become a cook or an auto mechanic. Well, what am I going to pick? So I went to Lowry Field in Colorado, Denver, and became an auto mechanic. And that's what I was when they sent me overseas.
What was military training like for you?
Well, the basic training was like everybody, a lot of push-ups and exercises and marching and sergeants yelling at you just like you see in the movies. I mean, they're nasty. And but it wasn't bad. And then my next training was auto mechanic school in Denver. And then went overseas. I didn't like being an auto mechanic because I ended up on Guam, and then we had no hot water, so you couldn't get clean. And I thought, this is no life. There must be something better. So I asked the education officer if I could do something better to improve myself. And he looked up my score. They have an AGCT score, I think I got that right, which is like an IQ score. And he says, okay, and he gave me a big catalog of schools. He says, you're eligible for any of these schools in this catalog. Pick one and I'll send you. In the meantime, I'll transfer you out of the auto club. You'll become my assistant here until you're ready to go and get you out of the auto pool. So I went through the catalog looking for the school that was the longest period of time, the farthest from Guam. That was the only thing. And I came up with the radar, 35 weeks in either Honolulu or Tokyo, Japan. So I stupidly picked Honolulu because I already stopped there on the troop ship on the way over. And who would go to Honolulu when you can go to Japan? But I wasn't thinking. So anyway, luckily I got sent to Japan instead of Honolulu. And then I went to 35 weeks of radar school, then another 4 weeks of ground radar, airborne and ground.
All right, I have one more question. How did you communicate with your family while you were overseas?
Ham radio and mail. It took 30 days, a month to get a letter home.
Really?
Either way, because it went by ship. And I don't know why they didn't have airmail, but they didn't. And so I had a friend who lived a block from my parents that was a ham operator. In fact, he was that all through the war, and he used to patch guys through it. He would contact a ham in some country, and GIs would come in and then talk to him. He would telephone their family, and he would talk to the families that way. So I helped him build his radio, and so I knew him pretty well. I knew what he did. So when I was over, and I never talked on the ham radio until I was in Japan.
All right. What was your average day like as a mechanic when you were?
Auto mechanic.
Yeah.
I walked to the huge hangar that was the auto pool, they called it. And there were all kinds of vehicles, Jeeps, 4x4s, 6x6s, big diesels, trucks. And we had some helpers who were Filipinos. And we just repaired cars all day long. But we just did everything. I liked rebuilding carburetors. And a little cleaner job than some of them. And it was always hot, not too hot. It wasn't really sweaty hot unless you ran around or something like that. And there was nothing to do there off duty except hang around or go to the beach. Tumon Bay was the name of the beach there. And it's all built with hotels now, Japanese hotels and Korean hotels. Then it was just a long beach for several miles, and the water, and it's probably a quarter of a mile out to the reef, and the water out to the reef is only 3 feet deep, so you're only waist deep all the time, dodging sea cucumbers and spiny sea urchins on the ground.
To expand on that, what type of vehicles and machines do you work on, and like what would you commonly like have to do, like fix and different things?
And the cars,
Yeah.
vehicles. Most of the things I like to work on were the Jeeps, and the largest car I like to work on was a 4x4, which is a Dodge Willys Jeep. I think there were some Ford Jeeps too, but 4-cylinder engine. And I think the Dodges were still 4-cylinder. They might have been 6, but it was a bigger engine.
Mm.
And mostly engine work. I didn't really work on anything but engines. That was kind of my specialty.
See.
So, during your time in Japan, Guam, and Manila, how would you describe like all of your interactions with the people that lived there? Did you say it was all positive or negative?
All positive. I got along famously with all the people. We didn't really get to know any Guamanians. It was a long ways into town. We went a couple of times, but the girls were not very pretty, and you couldn't date them anyway. And my surprise was that the Japanese people were so friendly, all the people. There was never a crossword, there was never an ugly look. They were just friendly. And about my second girlfriend, who worked at a photo shop, and I've got pictures of me. She took pictures of me, and she and me. But she lived out of town. And when we were there, fraternization was forbidden. Yet you could see it going on all the time, guys with girlfriends. But in the train system, they had chair cars and they had boxcars. The non-Japanese rode in the chair cars, and Japanese all stood up in boxcars or rode on the tops of the trains. And so my girlfriend invited me out to her house for a weekend, and she said, I'd been there before, I guess. But she said, "You'll have to come out by yourself because I'm not working that day." So I got off on Friday night and had to be back Monday morning. So she said, "But there's no chair car. So you got to worry about getting caught because riding in a box, well, any train, the train would stop once in a while. The boxcar doors would open up and there'd be military policemen outside. If they saw a GI, you went to jail." And so I'm in this train, and I'm a foot and a half taller than anybody else in the car, and in my uniform. And suddenly the train stops, there's a lot of chatter, the doors pop open, these Japanese are pushing me down to the floor and crowding around me and saved me.
So when you were there, did you witness a lot of development and westernization of Japan?
No, that was none at that time because we spent almost all of our time in Yokohama. Just kind of sightseeing trips to Tokyo, and I went there to buy my Canon camera, but only 2 or 3 trips to Tokyo, but every weekend and every Wednesday in Yokohama. And it was about a 30-minute train ride from Keio University. And everything from the school to downtown Yokohama had been industrial, and nothing was left but piles of bricks and tall smokestacks. And there was no rebuilding going on at all that I could see. And there was very little gasoline, and all the taxi cabs had coal burners in the trunk, and they ran on coal gas or whatever it was instead of gasoline. And there were very few cars, and everything was by train, Walker train. No, nothing was going on. Nothing was being built that I could see. Maybe housing. Some of the buildings in Tokyo where we hung out, the PX was the big, 5-story building, and some other buildings around. I remember we were drinking beer outside the PX one day on the benches, and an earthquake came, and that 5-story building started rattling and swaying, and I mean, we were really going. And it took off to avoid that building falling on us.
Jeez.
But nothing, just minor rebuilding. All the people lived in these little shacks made of wood and paper. And
Right. Overall, was your service a positive or a negative experience, or how would you describe it? How do you remember it?
Completely positive. Everything about it positive. Even the waiting in line. I learned early on, we almost always wore fatigues, which have these big pockets on the side, green fatigues, big pockets everywhere. And I learned very early on to carry a pocketbook. Every time there was a line, I'd pull out the pocketbook. First thing you know, they said, "Hey, it's your turn to step up to pick up your tray for your chow." So I never cared about standing in lines because I had something to do. Otherwise, it's just boring as hell. It's sitting around all the time waiting. It's hurry up and wait,
Yeah, I was just asking what you did, relating to military and
So
Casablanca.
I'm still a radar. I worked on radar sets in San Bernardino. Texas, we just hung around waiting for orders, and we got sent to New York and then on a troop ship to Casablanca. When we got to Casablanca, the purpose was to go to Nuasur Air Base, which was an hour south of Casablanca. And we were just building the base. It didn't even have the runway finished. So we were an air materiel commander, repair and supplies. And I had 26 radar repairmen under me as a 3-staff sergeant at the time. And there wasn't a radar set on the site. There was a radio altimeter in a C-47, and that was the only plane there because it would land on dirt. And so they're still building it. So we had nothing to do, and I farmed all my workers out to work in the PX and work as clerks and runners and things. And I kept one guy to order radar parts because we were to build a radar repair facility there, and we needed one of every kind of radar that the Air Force had in the base. So I had this one kid, I give him so many pages to say, when you order everything on these pages, you're done for the day.
After your service, how do you think the public's attitudes have changed towards veterans, and do you approve of it, or do you disapprove of it?
Well, it's changed a lot. And of course, the World War II vets are called the greatest, all that, but the guys that fought were. But then the Korean War was kind of a forgotten war because it was a big war and a lot of guys died. And a lot of guys are still over that. I just read an article that over 1,000 guys still over there they haven't found yet, buried in shallow graves by the Chinese, as a matter of fact. And so coming home from there, nobody paid any attention. I mean, they just came home, I guess. And nobody paid attention when I came home from Casablanca. I was still a veteran, but nobody cared. And then the Vietnam thing was just
bad.
a horror show.
What are some of the lessons you learned during service that you still carry on with you today?
I learned in service.
Yeah, or through your service and
well, I guess I carry it on somewhat today, but the thing I learned, and that was on the first trip going over, was to get a mentor.